to start when you put the harness on. Now, does he wear the harness like all day?
No, just for
put
once.
on 4
Yeah.
weeks. When you grab the harness, what tends to be like the behavior? Is it super jumpy, excited?
It used to be, but since
Okay.
we didn't train him on this, now he just comes and sits in front of us.
Okay,
Yeah.
so he's like relaxes.
He used to be wild.
Okay.
He'd be like,
Okay.
but now he just sits and lets you put it on.
He sets and he has no trouble with putting the harness on. Okay.
I mean, yeah, I just kind of hold it. I could take it off if he's excited now. But
Yeah.
yeah, he kind of sits there and lets you put his one buffer and then clip it. And that just happened naturally, I think, with kind of the calming process of all of this.
Okay. All right. Cool. I mean, my preference is always a harness that the dog puts their head through rather than having to put their arms through, only because oftentimes it requires us to like physically manipulate them in order to put the harness on.
Okay.
Whereas one that is just a hole, right? Like he can actually walk himself through the harness. I do also like a front clip. The other thing I don't love about these kinds of back clips are you have to put the harness on first before putting the leash on. Whereas I can grab one in the back, but whereas like a standard back clip harness that has a head hole, you could actually attach the leash prior to even putting the harness on, so you can kind of take one entire step out of the process.
Okay. I'm trying to visualize it. Yeah.
I'll grab it just so that you can see what I'm talking about.
Oh, okay.
So this would definitely be too big for him.
Yeah.
But it would look more like this. Also, so when I look at a harness like this, you can see how it is kind of right up into his armpits, right? That can just kind of get irritating. It can feel a little tight. Whereas something like this, it has full range of motion for his shoulder girdle. So like it's not going to affect his shoulder mobility at all, like while he is moving.
And they don't pull out of that?
No.
Such trauma from a past dog could get out of it.
So harnesses, right? And like harnesses are not meant to be worn like a double XL t-shirt. They should fit like a bodysuit. I use with my dog, and especially some bigger dogs as well, I have like it looks more like a tactical harness, and it does have like Velcro areas on the side, which I always think is cool because you can liven it up, with some different patches, or you can even put on there like do not pet, right? Like, please ask to be pet, things like that, which I think are always great as far as like advocating for our dogs out in public. But as far as the clips go, right? So like this has the front clip. The nice thing about these Y-shaped breastplates is with the front clip, if he hits the end of the leash, he's gonna naturally be turned kind of to the side. So whereas with back clips, oftentimes when dogs are pulling, they're pulling towards something straight ahead. And with the leash, like it's just a direct line kind of from our arm, the leash, and they can continue to pull ahead. Whereas if it's on the front and he pulls, he's slightly turned to where if his focus, let's just say this is a squirrel here, if his focus is just adjusted the tiniest little bit, you now have an easier chance of capturing his attention with like his name or come here with those novelty sounds, because he's not solely hyper focused on this squirrel. Just for a tiny bit.
Okay.
I can send you a link for these, right?
Yeah.
It's not to say like, oh, you have to get him out of this
We'll
harness.
do whatever will help the dog.
These are just little things, and you may try that and be like, Mike, I hate this harness. Like, it doesn't work for me. To that I say, totally fine. Like you have to use what works for you as well, what you're comfortable with. And and certainly what he's comfortable with. Like, I don't think he's uncomfortable in this harness at all. There are just certain things that I see where it's like, he could be, right?
Yeah.
And like that could have a bit of an effect on your walk. Because right now, there's nothing pulling him.
Yeah.
But once we are holding this leash and he's like kind of jerking around just because whether I'm applying it or he's applying it, it could start to be like, okay, this is now uncomfortable.
Okay.
With the walks, right? So I know we went over the pace walking, which.
Was that while I was here? What's the pace walking?
So the pace walking being that. Where's your keys? There's your shoes. So if we're walking Murphy.
Oh, then this way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
This way. Good boy, right? So that was like even there. He went way out. Murphy, this way. Good boy. Murphy, this way. Good boy. So I know we went over that, so I don't want to go over a lesson that we've, unless you need any sort of
we call it
refresher.
this way walking, so
Okay.
pace walking for
Love it. What I would recommend is if you can actually get into like a park setting and doing this walking.
Okay.
Mainly because him walking on the sidewalk right like Main Street, I think is probably just too much for him. It just overstimulates him. Whereas he really needs like super calming environments, very, very quiet streets, like ones that there aren't too many cars coming down, especially like around here, not like trucks, things like that.
Our alley would be perfect, just for some short. I mean, if we can't meet to a park.
Okay. Do you? Because if I recall, you're not in that, right?
We are. We're up by Northlight, but we have a private alley that has like nothing going on. It's a dead end.
Northlight. So like.
Gorgas track.
Yeah. So like Gorgas.
Yeah.
Gorgas is kind of a great area. The only problem is there can be a bunch of dogs there at times.
Yeah.
But normally, actually, like up that hill, a little past the gazebo, there's usually not too many dogs there. But really, practicing that paced walking in that field type setting, and really just making it more about Murphy moving with you guys rather than being in this mindset of like, okay, we have to keep him like moving along. That's where I think walks can almost be done to a detriment, where it's like we say, oh, we're going for a walk, which means it is an action the entire time. So if we're not moving and walking, we kind of get stuck in this like, what the hell are we doing?
Yeah.
Right? And like, think about all the times Murphy has been very, very interested and curious in something, and he's sniffing, and we go, come on, like let's go. As if we have somewhere special to be on this walk. It's normally just like, we're going for a walk and I'm standing still, so I'm taking a dog that is very curious and interested in learning something right now, and I'm saying, you need to stop that because we aren't moving. Whereas if he wasn't on a leash and you kept moving, right, he would probably continue to sniff that for as long as he wanted to, and then he would move with you. So that is how those park walks should be approached.
Okay.
Whereas like if he does stop to sniff something, and you
catch up.
and you kind of have all this leash in between you guys, you just wait for him to finish, and then when he follows, good boy, and and then continue your walk.
Okay.
It's things like that too, where we need to remember we're putting a dog on a leash, so like he's got to learn to trust you guys, right? That like you're not going to just like walk away, that you're not just gonna like pull him, and if he feels like he can move around on a leash just like he is right now, where it's not like super restrictive and he is kind of hitting leashes, the end of the leash, and like jerk this way, jerk that way, he's just going to be much more comfortable being outside on the leash with you guys.
And then remind me, are we clicking during all of this?
So,
Okay.
Really the only thing that you should be focusing on as far as clicking goes is like eye contact, engagement with you. Ideally, because you're kind of getting back into the swing of things, and the park walks will be a little bit new, I would almost have this be the progression of, so starting where it's like any eye contact. And that could be, you know, you're saying his name, you could be saying look, or, you know, Murphy gives it on his own. From there, I would because like with this, you're clicking and treat rewarding.
Yeah.
So we don't want to fall into the trap of like over rewarding. This is something that you would pretty much do for, we'll call it a week, right? Like just so that you're getting into the swing of things. And what we would be looking for, so we're gonna have like non-verbal rewards, verbal rewards, and then treats. So your treats are when you're clicking. And for this week, you're probably as close to 100% as possible for the treats, and you're probably giving, you know, some form of verbal reward while you're giving treats. Good boy, things like that. From here, I would really, so again, still looking for eye contact. When you say his name, but his response is like, we'll call it 0 to 2 seconds. I want to say like almost immediately, but just because, you know, dogs can sometimes take some time to kind of comprehend or hear what we're saying, we'll call it 0 to 2 seconds because it should be like Murphy, and he is responding to you very quickly. Good boy, yes, you're a good boy. And then I'd say like when he gives it, so you know, Murphy's, we'll call it not necessarily every time. We'll go about 50%. So you're going to be treating that about 50% of the time. Yeah. So again, we have nonverbal, verbal, and treats. For name response, when he gives it, you'll get 50% treats, and you'll kind of, you know, 50% verbal. You know, good boy, right? Because we want to make sure that he is getting feedback, right? But like the feedback does not have to be treat all the time. Quite honestly, when we do that, we actually start to devalue the treats because he's like, I get this all the time. So there's no novelty in it. Now, nonverbal, not really something that we talked about. However, we do it all the time. But outside, because the environment can be so overstimulating at times, when I say like nonverbal praise, it really just means like a smile, right? Like if Murphy looks at you, yeah, like if he, you know, if you're walking and you look down and he's looking up at you, you can just be like, you know, you can smile. He can read our facial expressions.
Yeah.
So a simple smile or like a nod or a thumbs up, like anything like that is giving him feedback, and that's really what we're viewing this as. In what way are we giving Murphy feedback to let him know this is what we want and we love it and we want more of it while we're moving around, we're actively walking. The great thing about the park walks is we are moving naturally. naturally with Murphy, because once we go onto a sidewalk, right, Murphy is having to adjust and move naturally with us. So if we could get him giving us a lot of eye contact at the park, you're gonna have an easier time transferring that to like your sidewalk
Okay.
walks, because you'll start applying these concepts, these rewards on your normal walks as well. You know, and then so anything that is under 2 seconds, right? You're treating that at close to 100% of the time. Anything that is outside of that, that's where you're getting the nonverbal and the verbal praise.
Okay.
Just because you want to give that feedback, but we're really trying to teach Murphy what actually gets him the treat reward. We're starting with any eye contact, right? If you look at me, right, I say your name and it takes you 5 seconds to look at me, I'm still giving you a reward. But the next week, I say your name and it takes you 5 seconds, you don't get a reward.
Right.
You do it really quick, you get one. And then finally from there, you know, call it, say week 3, when we're looking at the eye contact, again, the name response in 0 to 2 is now maybe more like 25% of the time, right? We're really like phasing treats out because it's going to start becoming a conditioned response, which means like he's just going to start doing it all the time because there's such a high probability that he may get a treat out of it. And then the same, like when he gives it on his own, you know, it will, again, about 25% of the time. And then anything outside of this, that's where we're giving the nonverbal and the verbal. And then, you know, we'll call it week 4. Both of these things would be at about 10%, and that's really what it should be kind of moving forward.
Okay.
And, right, 10% is 1 out of every 10 times he looks at you on a walk, he's getting a treat. But 10 out of 10 times he looks at you on a walk, he's getting either nonverbal, verbal, or a treat.
Yeah.
So he's always getting some form of a reward. It's just coming with varying values. I would also say, as you start to drop, so that second week, especially, that 50% of the time that you are treating him, you absolutely want to capture any time it is a high distraction moment.
Okay.
So think of, you know, it's very different if he's just kind of like sniffing the grass and you move and he looks at you, right? You can treat him for that. But big difference if he's sniffing the grass, you move, but then there's a dog in the distance, right? And he pops his head up, looks at that dog, and then looks at you.
Okay.
That is a situation where, you know, that's what you really want to mark, because in that moment he has a number of choices.
Yeah.
I could pull, I could bark, I could, you know, make all sorts of commotion about whatever it is, person, dog, squirrel, but he's choosing to look at you for that kind of reinforcement, that understanding, like, hey, what do I do next? And if you mark that, you know, he gets his treat, and then from there you can start to have him sit or lay down. You could do more recalls, depending on what the stimuli is, and you know, is he going to react to it or not?
Okay. Now I just want to smile at him all the time. I didn't realize. Why is your eye moving, by the way, now that I'm looking at you? Oh. Whoa, I'm just realizing something. His eye is weird. I just noticed this tear. Not that you're bad at that. That's really red, huh? I should look at you and smile more often. maybe it's time for our first vet appointment.
Well, Alex right here.
You're welcome. Oh, we go to Wissahickon.
Wissahickon, okay.
Yeah, he just hasn't been because he was through the rescue when we first got him.
Okay. Wishington's great.
Yeah.
Dr. Yard's awesome.
Yeah.
This concept as well is, again, like I know that you're getting back into the swing of things and kind of, feel like you're playing catch up.
This applies to
And that's totally
yeah.
fine. I would apply this kind of across the board. Because, right, it might be a little bit of regression
Yeah.
in your eyes, but there's no problem with a little bit of regression.
Yeah.
Like, it's
gonna
normal.
happen in life. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like, you haven't been doing something consistently for a couple weeks.
Mhm.
It only makes sense that there is some regression, but rather than being like, no, this is where we were at when we left, so this is where we're starting off again, right?
Yeah.
That can be a little bit of an uphill
Yeah.
battle. So,
You just pick up the type of
yeah, drop back a tiny little bit for a short period of time, and quite honestly, like, with the park walks, I'm saying like week 1, 2, 3, 4. In the house, I would say this is more like day 1, 2, day 3, 4,
Yeah.
day 5, 6.
Yeah, because he picked up so fast.
Right,
Yeah.
and he will, and so much of this is based off of how much repetition can you get in,
Mm-hmm.
right? Assuming that maybe you go for a park walk, let's call it 3, 4 times a week, right? Versus working in your house, 5 times a day.
Yeah.
There's much more work that you can get done there
Yeah.
versus out in the park. So, your times, your timetables are going to be a little bit varied, but yeah, I would drop back. And the things that he did really well inside, right? You should be able to kind of fly through this and get to,
With the right commitment. Yeah.
With pulling as well. So what I would recommend for, we'll call them like the street walks, coming out of your house and trying to actually go for a walk.
I just like calling it a street walk.
I would plan on not going very far. So you can have trained walks versus like, okay, we're just gonna kind of go for a walk. The only problem in doing that can be like, it can get a little confusing as far as when you're training and like when he can kind of be all over. And if he's pulling a bunch, it can almost
A
stunt.
little slow to progress. Yeah.
But with walking, right, it is, again, just like this, Murphy's constantly looking for feedback. Does he walk on a specific side?
It seems like it's usually the right,
Okay.
but honestly, it depends. I think it just depends.
Okay. How I would approach walking him is like, start walking. If he pulls out, in front of you, you stop.
Okay.
Not sure if he will. Okay, well, you want to make a fool out of me. That's okay. But I would.
What was he supposed to do?
So this, right? So
Okay.
he hits kind of that
Okay.
end of the leash, and rather than kind of allowing him to pull, standing
Stop.
still
Yeah.
and waiting for him,
Okay.
and actually really just standing still and almost waiting for him to do this, like look at you, because that's your opportunity to give him feedback of like, okay, this is where I want you, and then you start walking again. And he's gonna figure out really quickly, like if I want to walk, one, I have to be paying attention to the person holding the leash, but also like all of the walks are gonna start next to you. And
I can't believe the way he's paying attention to you though. That's not how it's gone for me. Maybe for Anna.
Boy. So, off, so we need to be going somewhere.
Yeah.
We tend to stray too far away from our house.
Mm.
So if the walk kind of turns chaotic and, you know, for lack of a better term, it turns into a shit show, like we're too far away from home to kind of stop the shit show before it becomes like a real, just like, oh my god, nightmare essentially. And you know, by the time we get home, like that was miserable. I don't want to do that again. I'm as goofy as it may sound, like I'm very, very big on like visualizing, especially if you have a dog that you struggle walking, visualizing how you want the walk to go. Like, how do you see this walk going?
Well, that's what they say. It travels on the leash, right?
It does.
Yeah.
You know, if I do think a lot of times we as people that really struggle with walking the dog, it is kind of a snowball effect of like, okay, this time was, and it's almost like, like I don't want to. So we're going into it right off the bat as like, it's a chore, it's something that we don't want to do, it's stressing us out. And if it stresses us out, it can stress our dog out. So keeping the walk even confined, you know, if your house is here, you know, and you got your sidewalk in front.
Stay on the street. Yeah.
What's that?
Stay on the street.
Yeah, just, you know, corner to corner and do that pacing back and forth all throughout. And, you know, if he hits a point where he's pulling too much or he's like freezing up, you know, you can take him. You can take him back in. I would also give him a chance, especially in those moments where he might freeze up, just give him a chance to overcome that obstacle on his own.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times too, like, we'll see a dog and they'll seem scared, so we're very quick to be like, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. And in doing that, right, like we know what we're saying, we know the message that we're trying to give the dog, but the dog's scared in that moment and he might be like, why are you talking to me like that? I'm nervous, I don't know what you're saying to me. No different than like sometimes when people are scared, the last thing they want is somebody telling them like, you're fine, you're good. Like they just need to be able to work through that and kind of regulate their own emotions. So just giving him the opportunity and the space to be okay and start moving on his own again, that can really work wonders long term for walking in a place like Main Street that is a little bit busier because
he's carrying him across the street to get here.
Because he can kind of gain that confidence all on his own rather than requiring you to pick him up and carry him across the street. So I really would. I would keep it to your block and to park walks until you feel like, okay, this is much better. Like, he seems more comfortable. He's walking, you know, better on the leash. I'm feeling more comfortable. Like, it takes two to walk. It is very much a bit of a dance. And sometimes those dances look like a masterpiece. Many times when I'm driving down the street, I'm like, that is the ugliest dance I've ever seen.
It's funny that you say that, because the other day I was walking him and his little brother Alex, his big little brother Alex, and he was pulling so hard, and I was like, Alex is with me, I can't, like, I was like, what if Mike were driving by right now? So disappointed.
No, not at all. Because I know it's always a work in progress. You know, even my own dog Gracie, she's great on a leash, but she walks better off leash than she does on a leash. She's all kind of frantic and just doesn't love it, no matter all the experiences and all the positive experiences that she's had on a leash. It's just something that does make her a little uncomfortable. Not for nothing, if somebody put me on a leash, anytime I walked outside, I'd be like, I'm restricted, I can't move freely.
But I can tell he'll be good off leash. He's not a runner, which is like, that's ideal. I just, in the city.
Another great park to take him to would be Chella is off of Henry. What I
Right
really like
past like the
about
horse field.
it is it, I think it's before, right before the horse fields.
Okay.
Or is it after?
I can Google.
I'm trying to think. I always turn off of Roxborough onto Henry, and then I think it's Waverly. It's like Henry and Waverly, or Henry and Live Easy, or something like
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
It's a huge field.
Yeah.
And then it also has a trail.
Yeah.
There's two trailheads right
We've
there.
gone through a trail.
Which is really awesome, even just for like a little bit of decompression, just to like spend 5 minutes in kind of a wooded area to allow him to kind of sniff freely and really not have it be about a walk and just like, hey, do you want on the leash? Take it and explore and be curious, and ultimately, I think for the walks, a lot of it's going to be about gaining confidence. And if you really start taking all of this outside, getting him extremely confident on your block, and then the great thing about the field walks is that, right, the idea behind it is like there's really no people, there's no dogs, there's no buses and cars and trucks. So it really does allow, it's going to allow Murphy to let his guard down and just kind of be more comfortable in that environment. Whereas, right, coming out of your home, his guard can be up, he can be a little bit tense, right from the get-go, which is going to cause a little bit of a struggle. But by working through that tension and getting him very, very comfortable just on your street, and he's looking up at you, you're marking and rewarding him, he's getting all this feedback, he's going to know, like, he can look up at you if there's a box truck that comes by and makes a loud boom, right? He can look up at you and know, like, you looking down at him, okay, we're safe here. And I think that's what a lot of dogs are missing, is that human canine connection of, can the dog verify that everything is good and solid and safe around them? Otherwise, they are kind of looking out and being like, oh my God, that was the scariest thing in the world. Where do I go? Because I'm not trusting that the person holding the leash is going to give me feedback or direction. Right, whereas that truck goes by, and even if he seems a little scared, he looks up at you, and you're like, good boy, this way, right? And you give him that simple direction, that to him can be like, okay, all right, like, she didn't freak out, so maybe I don't have to. Oh, we're walking this way? Okay, all right, you know what, we're good here. We're good. He's a good boy. He's a good boy. The other thing with the walks is creating a reward zone, so I would choose a side. I'm always in the habit of walking dog on left side. I think that it tends to be just more like industry standard. Also because I think most people are right hand dominant. I always look at it and like, whatever side you're comfortable walking your dog on, walk your dog on. But making sure that when you are rewarding Murphy, that it's always in one very specific area. Because, if he's behind you, and you're trying to reach back and give him a treat, or he's in front of you and you're kind of meeting him, halfway, he's going to learn, like, okay, that's essentially my treat range. Whereas if he's only ever getting rewards right here next to you, he's going to know, like, he hears that click, he's almost going to fall back. And then, ultimately, really like past this 4-week mark, really, when Murphy is next to you and looking up at you, this is where, you should be clicking and rewarding. When he's right next to you and looking up. Like, that is the position and that is the behavior that gets him that treat reward. Otherwise, he's getting feedback. But ultimately, it's him next to you looking up that moving as well. Like part of it
Right.
should be like you're moving, you're walking together, and this is like
Yeah.
it'll take time for this to actually look fluid, you know, for an extended walk. But starting with the house will definitely help because you're going to create this pattern very quickly in one very specific
Yeah.
place. And then you do that a bunch of times, and then the one day you turn the corner, right, there might be a little bit of regression because suddenly you're entering kind of like this new space, but your pattern will be so strong that he should be able to continue all of that eye contact,
Yeah.
you know, very, very smoothly when you do start to expand the walks a little bit more to like the rest of the neighborhood.
Okay. It feels like this on its own is as much as we did in the first few weeks.
Yeah, it is, right? It gets progressively more complex and not that this is super complex, it's much more
It's
of a
gonna be
process.
like every walk, yeah.
It's
That's-
much more of a process.
Yeah.
With the walks though, like every walk, even doing this, it does not have to be like this structured training walk for 30 minutes. It can be, you know, you're staying on your street, it can be 2-3 minutes of kind of pacing, you know, this way, marking and rewarding eye contact, and then it could be 10 minutes of you just like taking a few steps and stopping yourself and letting him just like sniff around.
Okay.
Because he's gonna let you know when he's like bored and ready to move on, because he's gonna end up looking at
We make
you.
our way to the dog park, the play, and
Yeah.
go back home.
I'm a big believer in not going for walks for distance, but going for time.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you have an hour to take him for a walk, like it doesn't matter how far you get. He's not fat.
Right.
He's not in need of exercise for lack of exercise sake.
Yeah.
So what's going to be more important is going slow so that he is comfortable with that entire path and his environment leading to, say, the dog park. And then all of the sniffing and the things that he can explore along the way, you know, you're going to the dog park as if, you know, that is the playground, but the playground it's the entire length of getting there, because there's so much that is new, especially now, like one, you have all of the dogs coming out now, so they're peeing everywhere. We've had so much rain, which, you know, that brings out a lot of different smells from the ground itself. We have the springtime, so we have all the flowers, all of the different plants and weeds and things like that that are growing that emit smells that maybe we can smell and we're like, oh, that's amazing, or that we can't, that he certainly can.
Yeah.
Right, so it really is. It's kind of like him going through a forest in order to get to the park, and he wants to explore that forest just as much as he wants to play at the park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like that's true just with the weather change. Like he's just happy to be out on the desk, like sniffing the air.
Oh yeah. I mean, our dogs have just been like basking in the sun.
And then he's like tired after that. I'm like, we didn't get out as much as we needed to today. Like we had been like on the deck all day.
Yeah, I mean, think about, you know, laying out in the sun like that. That can be physically draining.
Yeah.
Good boy. I would, you know, notice too, like I'm walking very slow here. That's how I would walk with him, right? Before, you know, if some people are just naturally fast walkers, where they are, like it can also be challenging to do all of the marking and the wording and stuff, like
Yeah.
especially if he smells something, it can just be a little too fast.
Yeah.
So really like slowing it down to teach him what it is, yes, good boy, that we're doing, so that he's able to be able to match that speed when we do start like a natural walking pace.
Mhm.
Good. Good boy. Good boy. Good. Good boy. Very good. But even that, like being very slow, right?
Yeah.
He's trying to like
Keeping him on the side.
yeah, he's trying to cut back from side to side, and just being patient with him and being like, like right, like this is where I want you to be,
Mhm.
and he's gonna understand that very quickly as long as you're patient with him.
Mhm.
I think that's ultimately what this kind of work comes down
Yeah.
to, is because again, that mindset of like we're out for a walk, we're supposed to be walking and kind of moving the whole time. When in reality, like that, if that's the mindset, the walk's for us, not
Yeah.
for him,
Yeah.
or for our dogs. It really should be, I'm taking the dog out for like an adventure.
Mhm.
Is really
Yeah.
what the mindset should be, because it can kind of lead you anywhere. I also like when you do expand outside of your block, I am a big fan of actually allowing the dog to kind of pick a direction.
Okay.
Right? Like, do they want to go left? Do they seem like they want to go
Yeah,
forward
he's
or
the
right?
garlic path,
I think it's really cool to be able to do that, because I do see a lot of just like left turns. It's like I call it like the NASCAR walk. It's
Yeah.
every day we're doing the same thing,
Yeah.
and right, our dogs are already like routined enough
Yeah.
when they're in the home.
Yeah.
Like, let's get them outside. There's a whole big world that is worth exploring, and that's where I think they gain a lot of confidence. When they do the same things like over and over again, they can almost fall into their own like bad habits and bad patterns.
Mhm.
Certainly piggybacking off of our bad habits and bad patterns. So yeah, just kind of giving him choice is, I think, really, it's a lot of fun, and he is making the decision. I mean, I've done that with a few dogs that I've worked one-on-one with, and you almost do kind of see this transformation of like
Yeah.
excitement when they get to
Personality.
pick away. Yeah. So it's cool to see. It's a good pool. Look at you.
I know.
It's so sweet when you sit down, just waiting for all the pets. Yeah. All the appeasement signals. Yeah, just lovely. Give me the love.
I know. He's a non-stop snuggler. And he hasn't been doing, we didn't train him out of it, but he hasn't been doing the incessant pawing
Nice.
either. I think there are a lot of behaviors that have just kind of seemingly dropped off a lot.
Yeah.
Even at the beginning level that we are in all of this.
And a big part of that is because one, when you did start, you were recognizing, or more so giving value to those behaviors, right? Like you kind of held yourself in giving feedback to those behaviors, right? Calling at you, okay, I'm not going to pay attention to that. And then he sits down, and then boom, okay, now you're giving him that attention, and learns real. He's a smart dog.
Yeah.
Learn real quick. Like, okay, this is what gets me what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
I mean, and it really is. It's basic level behavior modification, but we took a behavior that he was pretty persistent with, and we've changed that to be, you know, a nice calming behavior that we actually do want to reward.
Yeah.
Like I love when dogs are sitting down in front of me. That's like,
Yeah.
you're the sweet dog. You're not the dog that's like jumping all over me
Yeah.
and just, you know, scratching me up. And I mean, they're sweet dogs too, but
Yeah.
man, it's like
The love hits a little different.
yeah, it does. It does. Yeah, it comes with red scratches
Yeah.
and sometimes some bruises.
So how does this look going forward? Are we still able to like WhatsApp you questions
Yeah.
as and then maybe if we're like 6 months down the road, we're like, all right, maybe we need another 5 sessions.
You're able to WhatsApp me. I always say like if it's something where it would require like a huge explanation or like a session, I would say that.
Oh, and then we could schedule like one-off session.
So
Oh, okay.
so at the moment, I've had to tell a few people this. At the moment, I don't have that offered in my system.
Okay.
My plan is by the end of this month, I will have kind of all of that uploaded.
Okay.
Doing kind of a whole overhaul.
Like a graduate's offer.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll be, like I was telling you, I'll be starting those classes in May, and I will be offering, you know, I think I have like a single session and then like a 3-session package only for people that I have already worked with, because you know not everybody needs 5 more sessions.
Yeah.
Honestly, there have been a few people that have asked me, and I'm like, no, in good faith, I can't sell you a 5-session package.
Yeah. We can kind of
You don't need that.
refresh.
Yeah, but that's something that, because sometimes you do just need one
Yeah.
session, like,
Yeah.
or like, hey, we have progressed with the things that you have taught us.
What can we do next?
Where can we keep
Because
going?
this in itself is like the whole next like 2 months.
Yeah, it's
But we still have to like catch up from.
yeah,
last month.
and this is moving into more of your like intermediate type training, because
it'll take time.
it's not just that simple, like, okay, you look at me, click.
Yeah.
Like this does become, how do we start to apply it, and how do we start to reward it properly?
Yeah.
Otherwise
I'll
you
take a picture of
you
that.
get stuck treating all of the time, and
Yeah.
then oftentimes there's that regression because of it's almost like over treating.
Yeah.
Hi, good boy. Hi, good boy. Look at you. Who's a good pup? Who's a good pup?
How will go to that? I'm worried about his eye. I wonder how long. It's really red, right? Well, I
Yeah.
noticed because I was looking at him smiling and he was like kind of winking.
Yeah, he has the tear on his eye, which he doesn't have on this one.
There's like a dog flu going around, right?
I don't know what's moving what's going around anymore.
You would feel sick though. I think we do more than an eye thing.
Sometimes I'm just like, are you saying this so that you can